Welcome back. This is Kirti, clinical psychologist, certified ABA therapist and HOD of psychology department at Daffodils CDC, Hyderabad. So today let's explore another important topic again, where the parents will complain frequently and ask doubts how to reduce our child throwing objects. Yes, throwing objects. Child with autism usually does this behavior, a problematic behavior, and this turns into be a challenging when the throwing objects will become excessive. So excessive throwing objects, it could be anything. They just see some toys, they throw. They just see something, small covers any of the parents carrying, they take and throw. Or they see something, balls, they just throw. And few kids, they take something from the household objects and they just throw from a balcony, or they just go outside and throw. Such kind, throwing objects. It could be generalized to any of the things. So lot of parents ask this, how should we reduce that? We see often this excessive throwing in our kids. So today, let's see how we can actually reduce this excessive throwing in autistic children using our ABA techniques. So before going to that, first let us understand why the children tend to throw these objects or do this excessive way. So again, as I say in every video, anything limited is okay, but if it is going to excess, what happens is it creates problems to the child and as well as to the people in the surroundings or in the environment. So today I would be saying there are core main three reasons for this excessive throwing object. One would be the sensory stimulation, second would be the need for attention, and third could be a frustration and very difficult in communicating that frustration or angry. So what is a sensory stimulation is? When they want a kind of a seeking behavior to any of the sensory, could be they just want to hear the noises, the sounds of that objects. When you throw that object, child might be enjoying that noise. Could be that auditory senses, and could be that when you throw that objects, when the child would be throwing that objects, they like visually watching them. It could be from a height or it could be from a far place, whatever it is. That is like a visual sensory seeking. So these are a different sensory stimuli where the child will be having that self-soothing, self-stimulation while doing this activity. And the second is a need for attention. Kids, what they do is, when in an environment, they tend to see and get that attention from the caregivers, especially the parents. And when the situations are where they're unable to get that, what they want to do is they just throw the objects, and that throwing object might become excessive every time when a parent is giving them an attention. So what is it been relating in for the child? That you are negatively reinforcing that whenever the child throws an object, you are paying an attention. So you are providing their required result, their desired thing, that is attention. So this is another reason where this excessive throwing objects can happen. And the third one is frustration or out of anger, where because the child is performing an activity or the child is doing some ADL, activity of daily living, and is unable to perform or need help, where the child is not able to communicate that simple help, that simple please or simple come, take. When these words, simple communication is unable to be expressed by them, they get the frustration and anger. So how they show it? The coping mechanism would be definitely throwing the objects. And this becomes excessive when the communication difficulties just grow and grow. So these would be the three main reasons why the child would be throwing the objects. So now let us see how, using ABA techniques, we can try to reduce this excessive throwing behavior to a greater extent. So before I say any of the strategies, again, I would be reminding you that first step would be always doing a functional assessment or understanding and identifying the triggers or the antecedents. So why the excessive throwing is happening? What could be the reason behind it? What could be a triggering point behind it? This assessment, this analysis has to be done by taking the data. And when you take a data, you will be clear-cut able to understand for what reason. As I said, it could be a sensory, it could be attention, it could be angry issues, it could be the communication difficulties, could be any of these. Then when you come to a purpose, like what is the function of that excessive throwing objects, then you can implement the strategies. So the first strategy I would recommend, or it is actually helpful benefit for the parents to follow, is provide alternate outlets. See, when we said that the function of this excessive throwing behavior is throwing objects, is like a sensory. So as I said, could be a noise, could be a visual, could be anything. So when this noise, why don't we provide an alternate noise instead of throwing object? So what you can do is create a safe space, a particular time period, could be morning, afternoon or evening, whenever the child is active and doing this throwing objects to seek the sensory. Just create a quiet space and give a bin of soft toys or bin of his favorite toys which has a soothing music toys. So let the child throw there in a speculated area and also like in a safe area where the child can do that and get that sensory seeking, and again it is also in a safety measures. Instead of just randomly throwing whatever objects the child gets, if a child can understand that yes, whenever I need to seek that sensory input, I can go down to that safe zone and do my activity. The second important is teach communication skills. Again, this is always a very important point when you are dealing with any of our problematic behaviors, when you are trying to reduce them. So communication skills need not be a big conversations. We just need to teach the child simple word of help or simple word of please or a simple word of come, take. So these words will actually help the child instead of throwing that objects, especially when they need that attention. So if they come and use these words, come, please, help, that will reduce their throwing behavior, the throwing objects behavior. And immediately when you teach this communication skills, the third step or the third strategy would be reinforce the desired behaviors. These two should be followed every time when you practice. Because when you teach and when the child tends to learn and use that please, help, you have to reinforce that desired behaviors what we want. What is a desired behavior? Instead of throwing objects, the child is using a good communicative word or a simple word, or it could be a simple visual cue like a simple help card. These all are desired behaviors. You have to reinforce them. Reinforcement could be anything, a praise, a small cookie, a small candy, a big smile, whatever small preferred activity of that, could be a bubble blowing, anything. Just reinforce it immediately when a child does this desired behavior. And the next immediate thing is, see, when I said a sensory stimulation they're trying to do is, you can first also do a sensory kind of assessment. That is, see, observe what are the child's preferences. Are they liking too much of noises? They're enjoying that sounds, or they're liking that bright lights, or they're liking more of a textured things. So you can see in different ways like what are the preferences of the child. A small simple sensory assessment which a parent can do. When you do this, you can able to understand what are the child's specificities. Then the immediate strategy would be provide a sensory environment friendly. Why don't you give a simple squeezy toys when a child wants to have that soothing of a soft tactile or a touch? Give a sensory toy, or give a fidgeting where the child wants to spin which is being not allowed, and he just do it by throwing objects or just throwing objects in a circular way. Could be anything. Instead of that, give a small fidget toy where a child just spins the toy and enjoys that same sensory input in another environment friendly way. So you can give a weighted blanket, wear a heavy weight where the child can relax themselves, and there are different sensory things based on your child's sensory preferences. And the next one is, which is also a very, very major thing, is be very clear in your boundaries. Set the boundaries with the child. That means the consequences in a very clear way. That means firmly you have to make sure whenever the child throws the objects, because it is a safety concern as well, that at that moment child will not see am I throwing a hard object or am I throwing a soft object. It's just out of their sensory stimulation or attention or an angry, could be anything. So you have to make sure setting a clear boundary. Whenever a child throws objects, immediately the child has to get a consequence. Consequence could be a very firm stop, or it could be a very firm make the child remove his reinforcer. Could be that day a candy which you are supposed to give, or it could be a recess time which you have to give, anything. But make sure that child understands that excessive throwing is not a desired behavior. So these are simple strategies which you have to follow. But foremost thing I would suggest is, please seek the professional guidance here. Because reducing this excessive throwing objects, you have to take a guidance and the strategies more based on your child's unique needs from either an occupational therapist, a behavior therapist, or a speech therapist, who will guide you in an appropriate way how you have to do the assessment according to your child need and how you have to follow those strategies. So I hope using this ABA techniques along with the focus on a sensory integration made you understand and address this excessive throwing objects behavior, how you can reduce. So still, if you want to know more about any of a child's development and psychology, please feel free to contact us at Daffodils CDC, Hyderabad. Thank you.